You're watching 2-on-1, the internet's top sensation, and watch out, something wicked this way comes, because it is Hocus Pocus 2 week, a very spooky October to you, Spiff.
Ooh, ready? Boo!
Oh, wow, that's not bound in human skin.
That's good. That's really good. It is not, but it is bound in our love and hard work. And here it is. Arthur, our book is on its way out. Some people have already started to receive it, but folks, Deuces, friends of the pod, if you have not ordered your book, it is Are You Still Watching, using pop culture to tune in, find God, and get renewed for another season. It comes out this month.
This month, people are getting it already. And people are like, how can I review it? Give us a good word on Goodreads, give us a good word on Amazon, and buy it, because we want you to have it. We're really proud of it. And it's finally out.
It's in my hands. It's so good, y'all. It is 12 essays written by 12 different authors, edited by Arthur and myself. We are also two of the authors. It is meant for spiritual development. You could use it for small groups, because it's just little young, I almost call them young essays. They're little essays with questions on the back for small groups, for personal development, for just fun. I'm so proud of this book. I am proud of all of our authors, and y'all, it's almost here. Trick or treat. This is the treat of the trick or treating season.
Okay, so I don't know if I've ever told you this. So you were in St. Louis just recently, and I grew up in St. Louis. And there's something that is very particular to St. Louis with trick or treat. Have I told you about this before?
No.
Okay. So growing up in St. Louis area, if you said trick or treat, adults could absolutely respond with trick, and then you had to have a joke ready to tell, or you didn't get candy. So and it's like you teach a 3-year-old a knock joke, or else they won't, they'll hate trick or treating. And it's so I moved to Texas for seminary, and I was helping a friend hand out candy, and I'll never forget where this kid, trick or treat, and I go, trick, and he just kind of stares at me for about 20 seconds, and he goes, I just want some candy, man. Oh. I did. I gave him a handful. I'm not an ogre. That's how I found out the world isn't the same as the world I grew up in, which will help with Hocus Pocus too.
I love that. Well, I love that there are different traditions, and maybe we'll talk to one of our all-time favorite guests, Dana Trent's here with us today to talk Hocus Pocus 2, as we promised last year when we talked Hocus Pocus 1.
Absolutely. And I will never forget that Dana was very kind enough to say, Arthur, I know you don't do horror movies, but I would like to do Hocus Pocus. And yeah.
I think we're both really excited for today's thing. I'm really excited for the book. You know what else I'm really excited about, Arthur?
Advent.
Always. I'm always excited about Advent.
Yep.
And this year for Advent, I don't know what I might be wearing, but I do know where I will get my stole.
Oh, where do you plan to get your stole for Advent, Spiff?
Well, Arthur, I was online last night, as I am wont to do in the middle of the night, looking for incantations and other amazing things. And I came across the incredible, spellbinding, magnificent work of Jeff Wunrow and his team at Jeff Wunrow Designs.
That's wonderful. And do remember that for 17 years, Jeff Wunrow Designs has been making ordinary time extraordinary and Advent adventurous through the creation and provision of liturgical textiles, including but not limited to stoles, chasubles, copes, paraments, banners, frontals, altar accessories, liturgical face masks, and even more.
Mm-hmm. It truly creating incredible, beautiful, just stoles that mean something about who you are as a clergy person or a lay person, whatever your tradition is, whoever wears stoles in your traditions, they tell the story of you and God and God's people. On top of that, it is Clergy Appreciation Month. It is October. And so for your favorite clergy out there, you could get them a stole from Jeff Wunrow Designs, and make sure you use our code 2on115 for 15% off your entire stole order.
Wait, do you mean that if I use that code for one stole, I'll get 15% off? And if I use that code for 5 stoles, I'll get 15% off all 5?
Yes, and I think the math is if you buy 7 stoles, one of those stoles is free.
Oh, buy buy 7, get the 8th one free.
Got it. All right. Either way, lots of stoles for lots of different occasions throughout the year. You could buy 1 stole, you could buy 12 stoles and have one for every different month of the year as you go through our book with the 12 different essays.
Absolutely. So head on over to Jeff Wunrow, JEFFWUNROW.com. You could have gotten a tour of his workshop in St. Louis because that's where he's based out of Spiff, but so too is Chalice Media. So like
all roads lead to a 2-on-1.
Yep, the gateway to the Spiff. And we hope you will check out our sponsor after today's show. We should bring in our guest.
Yes, you should.
Okay, I'm going to do it. I don't know why I said it twice.
Wichita. I don't know what those words are.
Hey, but welcome back to the program, Dana Trent. We are so excited that you are here. Welcome back to 2-on-1.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, y'all. It's wonderful to be here and to be talking about Hocus Pocus too. It's exciting.
Absolutely.
It's so excited. Dana, since the last time we have talked, what has been going on? What do our Deuces need to know about you? How to follow you? What's going on in your life? And then how did you like Hocus Pocus 2?
Oh my gosh, Hocus Pocus 2 is amazing, and life is so good. I'm still teaching full time. I'm a world religions professor, so this movie is right up my alley. And since we last talked, I've got a brand new book under contract, and that manuscript is due December 1. It's a book called Vermilion. It's about a memoir. It's my memoir of my childhood of being raised in Western Indiana. In a family of carnival enthusiasts and kiddie ride peddlers and drug traffickers and all kinds of juicy, fun drama. And so that book will come out in February of 2024. And folks can find me online at Dana Trent. So thanks again for having me, y'all.
Yeah, I will absolutely be reading that the minute it comes out because I am so excited about it.
I know
say that about all of our guest books. I really don't.
Also true. But also not that we believe in other podcasts, but I mean, you do talk online quite a bit about your story, which y'all, if you have not heard, there is a reason that we love her because her story, she's an incredible storyteller who invites us into her world and expands ours. And we are so grateful that you are here.
Oh, thanks, Beth. Thanks so much for those kind words. And yes, and thank you for reminding me too that, the Breaking Good podcast, that's how this book started. So Breaking Good, which is a spin on Breaking Bad, of course, is the story. It's the beginning of the story. And so, yeah, the book will launch from there. But thanks, y'all. Thanks for listening to it. I appreciate it.
Of course.
We're so excited. And we're excited about Hocus Pocus 2. Friends, we do remind you that we are a spoiler show. Hocus Pocus 2 has just dropped on one of the streaming platforms involving the rat. So if you haven't seen it,
he is a mouse, not a rat.
Right. It is a Disney movie, so you can probably guess how it works out. There you go. But 29 years later, we get a sequel to Hocus Pocus, one of the better Halloween movies ever made.
The best, I think. I'm coming in hot on this. Yeah.
So there's a theory about Hocus Pocus and millennials, right? And it's the Wonderful Life effect, because It's a Wonderful Life was the reason it's a holiday classic is because it was free. So that, like, there was a snafu about rights. So television stations would fill programming that wasn't available by just showing It's a Wonderful Life over and over again because it was a Capra movie. But then baby boomers got used to seeing it, and then it became like a holiday necessity for some of them. Hocus Pocus was like the only Halloween content the Disney Channel had when it was starting up. So our entire generation, which was raised, not all of us had cable or whatever, but it's the same idea. Hocus Pocus was always on, and therefore it became a movie for people who are now 40-ish, give or take a few years on either side. That's like their thing.
Wow, I had no idea, but it makes perfect sense. Remind me, 29 years ago, did y'all see it in the theater as well, or were you seeing it on the Disney Channel subsequently? Smith is a yes.
I saw it in the theater, but I'm just you and I are just a hair older than Arthur. Not a lot.
Oh, okay.
Right, and I'm saying that elder millennial vibe, or late X, or whatever we want to call it. So
now that you have said that, it makes so much sense.
Totally.
It's perfect. Yeah. Because it's got the good vibe of, like It's a Wonderful Life. It's got some stronger themes, but it's not depressing. It's not gory. Yeah, it's not violent. Mm-hmm.
Did you grow up with like every third cat on your block being named Thackeray or Binks?
Yes.
Everyone had a black cat named Thackeray Binks or Binks, or my best friend Brian Dare in high school had a cat named Binks, and like it was, and then you got really mad when someone said Zachary, and you're like, it's Thackeray.
Thackeray.
Like, there was an entire like, you would like well up with like, no, like absolutely.
Yes.
You know, and Eric Von Detten was like the thing in the 90s. And so you really, that movie had it all. And I'm curious for the, you know, three of us, is this I'm usually generally pretty harsh on sequels. I think a lot of us are, just because it pulls on some nostalgia and things. I really liked this as a sequel. What did y'all think?
I did too. And Arthur, I'm curious what you'll say about this. I liked it. I was critical as well, Steph, going in. And I have to admit that the first 15, 20 minutes, I was looking at it with a pair of glasses that thought, this is just not going to live up to what I want it to be. This is silly. I don't like these callbacks. They feel too forced. And then I got lulled in to the rhythm of the movie. You know, just like I think happens in the first one, when you see it, when you've seen it for the 30th time, and you're like, oh, can I do this again? And you're like, of course I can. And I'm right there on the couch, and Fred's with me, and we're like, this is amazing. But it took a minute, because I'm with you on that. You know, my critical thinking kicks in, and I'm overanalyzing it in a lot of ways. But then I'm lulled into the nostalgia, but also the modern updates, which I know we're going to talk about. And I love that this movie, coming out of the gate, was way heavier on religion and theology than the first one. So that made me very happy. So once I was lulled into submission, I was having a good time. Arthur, what did you think?
So I'm ambivalent. Like, I'm of two minds on it. It's funny that you kind of figured out I'm a curmudgeon, because like I literally was watching the opening, and I thought, do the Sanderson sisters really need an origin? Like, do they need humanity? Like, do we have to redeem every villain? Like, part of why I love the Sanderson sisters is that they're children eating witches who are just bad guys. And it's funny in the world where there's an increasing gray to just have bad guys. And it makes trying to destroy the Sanderson sisters a lot. So, but then they add in like the complexity of, what does it mean if one is born a witch? Or what does it mean for this to really be a story about belonging? And it always has been. And some of the references were shoehorned in and kind of ham-fisted. Like, I will admit, I did like the gays watching Hocus Pocus. Like, at one point, Kathy and Jimmy peeks in a window. I was like, okay, that's good. I appreciate the Disney didn't try to make a nuclear stereotypical family film.
Yeah.
But yes, I don't know. I mean, the real question I have coming out of it is, how many people remember the events of the original Hocus Pocus?
Oh.
Because it seemed like Candle Shop Owner, Magic Shop Owner did, and no one else did. Like, did no one else remember, like, when all of the children kind of got drawn to the random landmark in the middle of the night? Or did no one else remember that time that all of the adults in town were having like a sweaty dance rave before, or 5 a.m? Or is that what like, it just, you know, I don't know.
Good question. Right. And you would have thought, like, if Trask is and I hope I'm pronouncing it right, I think it's Trask, is a descendant of Reverend Trask, would he have memory for those events? And it didn't appear, I mean, you knew who they were, but to your point, the sweaty rave and the calling of the children, come little children, that didn't seem to be on his particular radar either.
No, well, and it's, you know, how often do we dismiss? I thought about that a little bit, because again, we're now the parents in this move, like, we're in the parent age of this movie, where
I am going to dress like Madonna out of Hocus Pocus 1 for Halloween. So
I love that's good.
Yes, very good.
But right, like, how often did we growing up dismiss the stories of our parents, or maybe overlook some of the stories that we maybe didn't want to hear about their sweaty dance raves? And And, you know, here we are as adults being like, oh, right, maybe, but then expecting our kids to remember that. I don't know, you know, or that next generation. How often do we take the meaningful stories of generations ahead of us as part of our own story? I think is something that we often in intergenerational work, like that's part of that, is to bring value to those that weren't there. And so as I looked at that, and I had that similar thought, like, don't you all remember, like, hey, when these three random sisters show up, you know, and you think on Halloween and you know the lore, like maybe take it a little bit more seriously. But also in my own brain, I thought, there have been plenty of stories my parents have told me that I have just let go by the wayside.
Yeah. And I think it speaks to the whole thesis statement. The thesis statement that I landed on from this movie is that the occult is no longer dangerous. Like I feel like that was what, that's it. That's what this movie is about. And it speaks to your point. Like it was a little, you expected people to be a little more frantic, but that was the holdover of the Stranger Things season 4. We're all very scared of satanic rituals and witchcraft. And oh my goodness. But when the girls were talking about their 16th birthday rituals, Becca and Izzy and Cassie, and they're going to go in the woods and they're going to do witchy things, and she's got a crystal on her desk for the pop quiz. You know, I'm thinking to myself, that would not have gone over well in 1993. But here we are. The occult is no longer dangerous, is what I just sort of kept saying. Wow, this is really interesting. 29 years, you know, and I would love to hear if that even occurred to y'all or what you think of that.
You know, it's an obstacle. It's not good versus evil. And I think that comes back into the whole, like, and it's humanizing the Sanderson sisters. And again, the question I continue to wrestle with is, did we need to humanize them? Right. Because it does add a different dimension to them. Spiff, what do you think? I'm sorry, I jumped right on that.
You didn't at all. I wanted to hear what you said. My thesis out of it, I think they're similar. Is faith the ultimate incantation for the spell of like communal love? Or is faith the ultimate kind of incantation for the kingdom, whatever that might be? Like if the kingdom of God is the spell we wish to cast, then is faith, you know, and that unifying kind of nature of it, the thing that we need to use as the incantation, as the spell to get there. Now I realize, like, in part, as I say this out loud, there are going to be people out there who are like, oh, witchcraft, Christianity, and all of that. And it's like, you know, part of me was a little bit like, oh, this is what we're doing today. All right. Like, and I think it's really cool and beautiful, because as I watched these young witches, these hopeful witches, an entire town dress up as lore of witches, I thought, and then these witches came to life, and there was both excitement and fear, but not in the way in which I literally thought, you know, so many of our people pray for Jesus to come now, come be present. And if Jesus showed up like immediately in the way that the Sanderson sisters do, I think that there would be more fear and turmoil and chaos than when witches show up. And I think that that's a really, for me, I thought that was a really,
was it brown?
Oh my God. I just thought that for me, I kept wrestling with that. Would be like, we talk about bringing Jesus to, to the present, or seeing Jesus in the present often in our communities, in the way in which on Halloween, in this movie, the people of Salem talk and, kind of bring about the Sanderson sisters. And I don't know that we would be as prepared to welcome Jesus as they are to welcome these witches.
Yes, 100% agreed.
And it's
absolutely.
There's also the outsider. There's the outsider winning vibe.
Right.
It's the phrase that I've seen pop up the last couple of years is, we are the descendants of the women you didn't burn for standing up for themselves. And they weren't witches. They were outspoken women. They were women who would not conform to the patriarchal standards in the late 1600s in Massachusetts. And I want to kind of throw this one in there because I did love it. and this is something I loved in this movie, so I'm going to say there was something unequivocally wonderful, which was they did the shtick again with like the broom, then the vacuum or the Swiffer, I think this time around, and then the Roombas.
Yes.
But the reason witches flew on brooms was because they were using something that was supposed to keep them chained at home, because they always had to sweep and they always had to maintain.
Yeah.
Witches used that instead as a vehicle of their liberation as opposed to their oppression.
Wow.
And so consistently doing that with cleaning supplies is something I adored. And then they ate the salt circle, which was such a good gag. And I like good
so
gags. So
it was great. It was a nice little spin.
It modernized this as a sequel. I think it modernized the narrative and the story and why they were here and who's involved in this story really well. And I think that for me, as a preacher who seeks to often not reinvent but retell stories for a modern audience, right? Why do you care about these stories? I think that we can look to well done sequels as a way in which to help us exegete our text for a modern era. Because again, we all remember, all as they get on their brooms and their vacuums and whatnot in the original one, and how was that going to happen again? And now it's a Swiffer, and I just think that's such a well done modernization to something that is meaningful. You immediately understand when it does. It ties to the history of it, and yet it pushes us forward.
Well, is it fair to call it a sequel, or is it just another Hocus Pocus movie?
That's a good question, because I thought about the ways in which the narrative, like in our religious and indigenous traditions, narratives are told through oral tradition first, and then perhaps they change shape over time. And did you notice, and this speaks to your question, Arthur, about is it a sequel or is it a standalone? The narrative was retold about where the book comes from. In the first one, it comes from Satan, and he's considered master. And in this one, it's Mother Witch who bestows the book. And so it's interesting in that, does that, to your point, does that open it up to make its own standalone retelling of that through a different lens that is divine feminine, that is more feminist in general? And then we have the whole, I'm sure we're going to get to it, but just the through line of sisterhood in this movie, which was incredible. And also the ethos of power is meant to be shared, which is like, oh my gosh, to me, that's a standalone ideology that is different from the first one.
And I like that, because I think it's a reinterpretation. It's almost it's retcon,
right.
Or it's a different lens entirely.
But it is also a sequel because it continues the same story. It is the same story, which is technically, I think, the definition of the sequel.
But I also would argue that if you don't have to watch the first one to completely understand the second one, it's not a sequel, because it's not a continuation of the story. It's the same elements of the story that would participate in it. Like a James Bond movie should be able to stand alone. The Daniel Craig era is a complete exception to it, but every James Bond movie, except for Dr. No and From Russia with Love, have a through line and like the same kind of idea, but they stand alone by themselves, and yet they're part of a series. I guess that's the question: is this part of a series or a sequel to it? And I'm going to argue a series, because it does retcon the divine feminine, or rather the power of the feminine. Right. And it, we if we toss Binks and we toss my childhood crush Omri Katz and Thora Birch and the girl with the bodacious tatas, or whatever the 90s phrase was, which was horribly inappropriate, but they got rid of a lot of the mythos, and they didn't negate it. They just said, here's another story that, I don't know. I think we can disagree, Spiff.
I would say that a Hocus Pocus 3 would be a continuation, because I think that we would get another Hannah Waddington, because you see the crow at the end fly beyond them. And so we are done, I think, with the Sanderson sisters part of the magic, possibly, that has now been shared with this next coven. That's the continuation of the coven. And so I don't know. I think we might just disagree. I think this is a sequel, and I think there is room in the world for I think prequels. I think whatever it comes, but or continuations. I would say it's a sequel though. But I do want to get to the overarching story of to share power, which is, I think, well, I agree that would be the crux of what is happening to the story, and what we are to call from it. I think it's an incredibly poignant message, especially for those of us in spaces of power. And what does it look like to lead with a vision to share that power, and who has that ability to do so? Like who gets to say? Because I think in part, I don't know. Let's leave it there. What do y'all think? How did that narrative strike you?
It was very powerful, and I think in part because there is a reinterpretation, to use Arthur's term, of the cast, and we now have a BIPOC cast, which is incredible, predominantly BIPOC cast, and the ethos of power is meant to be shared. We have a young BIPOC woman who is bestowed with the power on her 16th birthday. Her new coven is established. It's very clear that the coven is oriented towards sharing power, and also naming truths. The way they name the truth to the jock-ish guy at the end and teach him that he's actually been bullying people, but he doesn't. He's, bless his heart, right? As we say in the South, he is either not choosing to be aware, or really doesn't have the critical thinking skills to put it together. And so they become leaders, right? This brand new coven. And so, but the converse of that is you see Trask, right? Who in the very beginning, the first frames, he has the power, right? He is the town pastor. He is following the puritanical rule. He is going to charge Winnie with being married now that she is aged at 16. And so the tables are turned. The white male puritanical authority figure is no longer in power. Instead, it's these young women. And I just think that's incredible. And I would love to hear y'all's take on that as well.
I thought, so Daniel Ruttenberg has this great book out right now on repentance and repair. And it's maybe the best thing I've read all year. Probably the best thing I've read in a long time.
Besides
Are you still watching, using pop culture to find God and get renewed for another season? Buy our book in abundance, but also pick up Daniel Ruttenberg's book. It's really good.
And pre-order Dana's book too. So there we go.
Oh, bless you.
Yes. You know what? Yeah. Write Penguin Random House and say the manuscript isn't even in, and I want 4 copies.
Just follow her Goodreads and follow her on Amazon and when it pre-order. So
I love it. So when Jock Boyfriend is, I will argue he really doesn't know. Now he doesn't know from a place of extreme privilege and from extreme social insulation. But you'll notice the very first thing he says is when he finally realizes what it is, he goes, I have so many people to apologize to. And I thought, now that is a movie I would actually like to see. Is like the work of reconciliation in this town.
Yeah.
And which is, again, as they always those who were pushing against, and they dared to be outspoken. There is a level of the person who speaks outside of the norm is a rebel to the people who are in power, but is somebody seeking justice to those who are being oppressed. And so it's that witchy thing becomes, I have a theory that Disney was like, we know the audience that's going to watch Hocus Pocus too. It's not going to be the mom in Texas who said evil spells can enter your house through the television. I don't know if I sent you that TikTok spiff. It's awesome.
No, I don't look for it.
Yeah, but I think they actually said, here's our audience and this and that. Like I will admit, I needed to see a drag queen version of the Sanderson sisters just being accepted as a drag queen version of the Sanderson sisters.
Yes, we haven't even landed on that yet. Yes,
I needed to see a
we got Drag Race stars up in here. It's
a non-binary person engaging the Sanderson sisters, so excited in public in Walgreens. Like it's
Yes.
and by the way, the Walgreens thing, this is your little piece of movie trivia. There is a Walgreens built on the site of where the Salem witches were actually hanged. Like you walk out of the Walgreens and you turn right and you're in the courtyard. So I want to say that wasn't just like happy product placement. I'd like to believe the writers were like, let's be really intentional. But also I bet Walgreens
Well, I like that then, that because it shows it takes what is there and present, because at the same time, how many spaces, and I will name that I didn't recognize this until I moved to the East Coast, because East Coast is a whole lot better about like a plaque that says in this place something happened. Whereas I'm from California, where it is originally indigenous land, and there's not a whole, you get some, gold mining, like things like, a lot of those types of plaques from mid 1800s, but not of whose land is my local Walgreens on, and making you think all of those things, right, that we generally tend to overlook. Who in all of those spaces, because we know that some of this is based on, I don't want to say real, but like real people who were murdered in that space for lots of different reasons, that, they did walk around. So who, you are sharing that time and space with them to say why, how did we get here? Whose land are we on? And so I like the idea of that, especially as the, what is his name? It's Amok-Amok-Amok's character who turns their house into a gift shop, like a space of magic. And like, how many gift shops have we just turned into, commerce and capitalist spaces of capitalism on the grounds of our history? And what power is in those spaces still? What energy still is transferred from, each generation to generation as you make something anew? And is that resurrection of a kind, I guess?
Ooh, yes. Ooh, that's an interesting, I hadn't thought about that. And for me, the Walgreens too was a tip of the hat and a wink and a nudge towards our culture's obsession with a particular beauty and age standard. Yeah. And so I think the women, the Sanderson sisters in there drinking the child potions in the Walgreens, it was really, I thought, whoa, this is well done. Now, Arthur, to your point, I'm sure it was product placement as well, right? It's both and, but I really appreciated sort of the meta themes of, we began with Winnie's, discrimination in terms of her age, right? Turning 16, she's now considered aged. She's got to be married off. And then the Sanderson sisters continuing through line with their obsession with youth and staying eternally young, and their obsession with power, which in the end, Winnie relinquishes over sisterhood. Like, again, the power must be shared and the sisterhood is preferred over all else. And
I love that one of the things that I just was like, everyone needs to see this now, because once again, one of the things that I really love that they did, how to modernize this, right, is that the sisterhood, the coven, the thing that we are meant to be, which is in community, does not necessarily anymore need to be of blood relative, of single, like that it's these three women who have just young women who have just practiced a narrative of friendship and collegiality and care for each other, is the coven, is the thing where magic begins and where magic belongs. And for me, I just kept thinking like, oh, this is the question of always, what is the church to learn from these spaces, is honestly like the church is meant to say, we belong together because we share these stories and these histories and these experiences. And it no longer matters if you are of a similar anything, be it blood, be it mindset, be it, socioeconomic status, even location anymore. That we have that the quote coven, but in this case church, the thing, community that we are called into is so much more than we have ever given it credit for. And once we see its moreness, we can't go back. Now that we know that the power to be shared is amongst these three young friends who are like sisters to each other, and that knowledge is shared to Mike, the boyfriend. I looked it up. His name is Mike, and to the Sanderson sisters themselves. Like, what are we to learn from the ancestors and their stories that we inherit, and what stories are we casting to the future so that when they look back, they know what to build off of, and how to build the community. I think that both the book and our book call us to.
Oh my gosh. Yes. Amen. And thinking of the book too, and Arthur, I'd love to hear what you think about this. Well, two thoughts. Spiff, to your point, there's just so much here. Spiff, to your point, I love that the rituals, most of the rituals took place in the altar of nature. The sacred space was nature. It's no longer tied to bricks and mortar, not even the Sanderson house. It is outside in the woods. That is the altar. That is the sacred space. And then in terms of the book, right? What struck me, and I would love to hear what y'all think, what struck me is that the book this go round had a conscience. And what I mean by that is that it was visibly distressed and did not want to open for Winifred to the almighty ritual that was going to give Winnie the ultimate power and sacrifice her sisters. And so the book, which is described sort of as more satanic in the first one, is to me seen more as a empathetic, conscientious character, which I think this might be a stretch, but we could tie that to us being people of the book. And what does the book say to us today? And what are the ways in which our book is a living, breathing document?
Well, the book is a gift. And that's the big change, because of course the book is bound. I'm a big book binding nerd. The book is bound to look like humans can, obviously. One is not flayed for a book. Like, one doesn't do that for gift. They kind of decided to move away from that, and I think that makes sense. They didn't really overtly name it in there, but the book is a gift. So I preached on 2 Corinthians 8 this past week because we were wrapping up stewardship. Get ready for the ding. I don't know if you know this, but I've been doing the Corinthian letters of Paul now almost the entire time we've been doing this podcast. I'm almost done. Don't tell me how 2 Corinthians ends. And so I started my sermon, though, talking about how 2 Corinthians isn't 2 Corinthians. 2 Corinthians is probably 4th and 5th Corinthians and maybe 6th Corinthians, but maybe not. And I love the idea of trying to parse out, like, what does it mean if it's chapters 1 through 7 and then chapters 8 and 9 and then chapters 10 through 13. And I recognize that no one else in my church gives a damn about this like I do, and I don't spend a lot of time on it. But the point I didn't actually really hammer home with them, but I'm happy to share here, is it should change the way we understand the Bible, right? So the Bible is this fully written document that's handed down by God, who's very angry with us and who wants us to understand that while the Bible is not officially the 4th person of the Trinity, the Bible is the 4th person of the Trinity. And it's without mistake, and it's without error, and it's without problems. And you should find all of the little quotes you need to tell people how they're wrong. Or, I mean, it's a question of authority. So what does it mean then if the book that was just this gift from Satan that crashes through walls and responds to book, suddenly then, oh, there's our book. Wow, it worked. What does it mean then? Right. And I think that's a matter of interpretation, which is why I would say this is one of the movies in a series and not a sequel, because that's a pretty big retcon.
And I would push back because I think that we are the 4th person of the Trinity. So I would say that that the Bible is probably, if we're expanding it, we'd be somewhere into the Quinn, like it's the 5th part of it, because I think that the reflection and the divine within us makes us a part of what we reflect and are a part of, which would make us part of the Trinity.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry, I interrupted, but I go into the God-breathed stuff. Sure, Scripture is God-breathed. We also have to remember that we are God-breathed. So I would even argue the Trinity is a little too rigid for my tastes. I'm not giving up on the Trinity. Still gonna do it because I don't know, it's fun. But like,
I'm with you on there. I think that I just wanted to like to name that I also think that we're in there too, because I think it's important for the work that the book calls us to do is because one of the questions that I came out of, and so I'm curious where you both fall on it, is that at one point the book is actually not useless, but isn't necessary, right? They go and they finish the incantation without the book.
Right.
I think that in part, going back to Dana's first thought, or one of the things you first said was like, all of these traditions come out of oral traditions, right? And like the book makes it helpful and kind of more obvious, but we're not bound to it. And I thought, what an interesting way in which to engage scripture sometimes, because especially like the apocryphal text or the things that are meaningful to us that may not be in our holy scriptures as is written by the interpretation and translation that you are currently using. Because at one point, right, they go to Billy's tomb and they finish the spell and it works. The book does not need to be open. They know the word, they know the messaging because they have invested in it, and you have to invest in the things you want to thrive, and what they want to thrive is the magic of the book.
But they're also ignoring the soul of the book in order to get the perceived
1000%
benefits. Right.
The soul. I was thinking consciousness, but that's a better term for it. And it is also the book that then opens up to reveal to the new coven how they can reverse the spell and get Winnie back to her sisters, but by sending her back. So in the end, it's the soul of the book that redeems Winnie and reconnects Winnie with her sisters.
And I loved some of our great, when the biggest dreams that we can cast sometimes come to fruition in ways that we don't anticipate. Like, right, Winnie wants to be rejoined. The thing that she loves the most is revealed. It's not power, it's actually her sisters. And she wants to be with them, and she thinks they're coming back, but instead she goes to them. Spoiler alert.
And she's okay with it.
She delights in it at the end. She's not afraid. She's very it's that last vision that we see of Winnie in the first one where she turns to stone in this kind of Medusa-esque way and then explodes. And in this one, it's very much, there's a rejoicing there. And I think they're all enveloped in it. It like that emotion, or the energy of that emotion, is visibly seen and swirling around the new coven, the old coven, kind of giving time less of a stagnant meaning and more of a invitation into the what's next.
And this is absolutely a masculine versus a feminine thing, right? Like this is Hocus Pocus versus Hocus Pocus 2. We can't undersell the fact that Max is horror movies. I read this a long time ago and I've never really gotten over it. Horror movies where there's a slow moving monster chasing a woman is meant to be a adolescent male's wish fulfillment, right? Because the woman eventually bludgeons the monster to death with a phallic object because she no longer risks being caught and penetrated, but instead becomes the one who assaults. Essentially, like, and I'm overstating this theory, but there's very much this idea of like of boyhood into manhood, so to speak. And I'll try to find the article, Spiff, because you're looking at me like I'm crazy.
I would love to read it.
I think we're both just, as women, I think we both have the lens of a different lens in which we have experienced those thoughts. And I think there's a so like watching Hocus Pocus and then Hocus Pocus 2, because of course I watched both. Max is aggressive and he's violent sometimes, and he's going to be a tough guy. And then there's Ernie and Eyes, or Jay and Eyes. Ernie is Eyes. I was really hoping they'd have like skeletons with the shoes hanging in.
I was too. Yes.
I don't know, but like it's that there's we have to I have to protect my sister, and I'm gonna fight. And this one wasn't fight. This one was, I'm going to help you, even because we're in this together, even if we are at conflict right now. I'm not saying that's a feminine thing versus a masculine thing only. I think it's an audience.
I also think there was more given to Max's sexuality in the first one, of being a virgin and all of that, than we're comfortable.
Why wouldn't a 15-year-old kid be a virgin?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yes. And they handled it so well with Sam Richardson as Gilbert. And yes, that was lovely. That was a fun little adult humor.
I loved it. And and now we're not one. I don't think we're meant to, sit around and be like, but why is she 16 and a virgin? And that's a real problem for her. It's like, no, move on. That like women's sexuality is not at the crux of this anymore, even though one could make the argument that all of the witch trials is at the crux of our sexuality, but that this is much more that the crux of power here that they are seeking to both release and contain in a kind of both and way is situated in the like heart of community.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a real relief to me. I loved the emphasis as opposed to the romantic connection between Max and I'm blanking on the young woman's name. Oh my gosh. It's not Allison?
Oh, that sounds right. I'm gonna look it up while you talk.
Okay. So that I was relieved not to have to cope with that sort of heterosexual normative stuff from the first movie. That was a real relief. I was glad that they kind of took it up to your point, Spiff, that it focuses on power and sharing and love and community and themes of bullying, which was present in the first one, but through a different lens. And I was very relieved that they didn't go down the trail of kind of the heteronormative romantic relationships. We can get that from other movies.
Her name was Allison.
Allison. Okay.
There wasn't any talking animals in this one, which I thought was like Thackeray is no longer right, like because there's a talking cat in the first one that plays he's the storyteller.
He's an immortal talking cat,
right?
Who is really a boy,
right?
From 1690. Sorry, right. I know you know this. I just like talking cat doesn't even begin to scratch the surface.
Sure, and yet the stories are known. I thought it was a really interesting kind of talking serpent into today's like, well, there's a talking serpent. Why should we take any of this still seriously? Well, back then there was a talking cat and we can still take this seriously. That, the things that were true for one group of people and even one story and one community does not necessarily always have to be true for the communities that come after it, but does have something to infuse in the lessons that they have learned.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And again, I think going back to that's what that whole community does as well. And I will say, you still get Billy. We do get
Billy.
We get Billy, and we get a walking mummy who's like, the Walking Dead. He's like, but I'm a nice mummy. Hold up, like
right.
And we get Billy, who isn't resurrected. He's just been waiting.
Right, he's just been waiting. Yeah, that was very, very interesting.
Which ties to 30 years ago, which nobody seems to remember in this movie, but they do, except when they don't.
Well, who in our churches is sleeping or is just resting, waiting to be resurrected and called from their slumber into new life, who is into community, into participation, who has been walking through our halls just waiting for someone to notice that they're still there. Was one of the things that I thought Billy has institutional knowledge that is helpful. But Billy was also willing to interact intergenerationally and seek for and learn what was happening now. It wasn't just, well, this is what happened last time, let's do it that way. It was very much like, okay, what's next? How do I use what I know and who I am and my gifts to move forward for this time? And I thought that was a really good character through line for someone that's kind of a B-list player in the first episode, or the first movie.
We're hoping it's going to be a limited series.
This is just an episodic. It's just like and not an every 30-year episodic.
Okay. Yeah.
So does there need to be a Hocus Pocus 3?
Ooh, good question. Well,
let me rephrase it. Should there be a Hocus Pocus 3? Not need. That's a weird one.
And will that be left up to Gilbert, right? If he's the keeper of the last black flame candle that we saw at the end credits.
Will Gilbert have the book?
Oh yeah, the girls have the book too. So we've got a third black flame candle that is in Gilbert's shop. The girls have the book. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what y'all thought, but for me, do you remember? Okay, so the book is on the shelf and they're looking for it, and the book is sweating because it also doesn't want to be found because it has allegiances to Winnie and her sisters, and yet I think again it's cognizant. It's got this. It is sentient in a way that we didn't understand it before. And I think for me, I saw a lot of the church in that moment of they have the church writ large, regardless of, I think, your denomination or your spiritual journey. The Big C church is on the precipice of something new. And a lot of us are sweating it. And I think it's because we have allegiances to what was, where we have been, people that have journeyed well with us and we have invested in, and yet there's a part that we know is yet to come, and that we can anticipate and foresee in our own ways, but it's uncomfortable. We don't want to be pulled off that shelf into new hands. We don't want to be opened by unfamiliar faces. And yet when we do, liberation happens in new ways for more people.
Yes. And in the end, Becca calls the book and it comes to her. And so there is the sentient being of the book transitions to the next generation, the new coven.
What do you think is in all the other copies of the book?
Oh, on the shelf, you mean? Oh, the ones that Gilbert. Do you think Gilbert?
It's a replica. I mean, he probably didn't open the sentient book because he was like, "Oh, he's awake," you know. But
right.
And he probably couldn't, right? Because the book doesn't open when it doesn't want to. So I don't. Right. I kind of anticipated it being one of those, like, it's where you would keep your candles and your matches, like a fake, like a hollow book.
Yes, a hollow book. That was my thought too. That it's one of like a touristy, one of a knickknack you can take home, to remember your trip to the Sanderson bookshop. that was my sense too.
You know, it's really bad when I go to independent bookstores and I buy stickers. I have like this stack of just independent bookstore stickers because I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I have them. Neither here nor there. So I'm sorry, Sam Richardson's character. What was this? Gilbert. Is Gilbert a bad guy?
I was just wondering that myself, because Gilbert is clearly, you know, he's part of the first movie in a flashback. They've recreated that flashback to call back to the first movie.
To try to prove that there were people of color in the first movie.
Right, exactly. right, exactly. But clearly, instead of being traumatized by the calling of the children, Gilbert is curious. And Gilbert is forever trying to get back to resurrect the Sanderson sisters, because to your point, Arthur, in the very beginning, he suspects that there is something good about them, right? That they can be redeemed as characters. So then we sort of are led to believe that Gilbert is a good character and he has faith in the Sanderson sisters, and he tricks Becca and Izzy into lighting the candle, and he's got a third candle. So
he also gives them the tools with which they can escape the curse.
Yeah. Oh, yes. That's right.
And I think just it was intentional for him to give them the candle. I think he's a chaotic neutral presence. I think he's interested in magic. I don't think he's interested in good or bad.
Interesting.
Well, I think I disagree, because doesn't he say that Halloween was like, the Halloween he saw them was like just a really bad one for him for whatever like he's traveling. First of all, he's like
because he was almost eaten.
Right.
Because he was almost.
But yet he wants to resurrect them, which is really,
because I think that he doesn't know. No one really believed it unless you were there for the story in the first one, like an active participant, that they were all. You don't really know what happened to you. You don't believe that these witches maybe have come back and are putting these spells on you. He believes when he sees them fly over and he follows, like his faith is resurrected in being able to see the magic in an experience of his own conversion of that, like a real kind of Pauline space where his eyes are opened into what is coming next. And and then continues that life of faith into becoming the books. They're really trying to figure out who is next, how to bring them back, because he has this experience that who's he telling? Are people believing him? Do people know? Because to your point, Arthur, a lot of them seem to have forgotten. One, I think the rave dance party, right? They're all under a spell. You know, they do the flash mob, and Tony Hill's like, flash mob, I love this. And then they all like stop, and he's like, oh, and they're all like, how did we get here? What happened? Like, they don't always remember themselves. And so if he's the only one who has seen this story from afar and is maybe telling it, maybe isn't, but is working towards what that story might become,
then he's bearing witness.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. Oh.
And then he's just the orator of the New Testament, if we'll call it,
right. Right.
of what is next to be known in these witches that continue to call us into each other.
Man.
No,
I like it.
Oh.
I think I have to sit with it for a little bit.
I do too. Yeah.
What I wish we could do is like revisit episodes, but like just like the pins that get pushed in the last few minutes that I'm like, I need to chew on this for a while, and then I do, but we don't record anything about it and talk about it.
Right.
Text that'll come afterwards. We'll just have to like screen grab and throw them and be like, hey y'all. Well, if y'all want to continue the conversation, you know how to find us. Comment below and let us know.
Well, I do want us to stay cognizant of the time. That's my bingo phrases.
It's true. I mean, Danny, well, we could talk about this forever, because you're right. This movie has a lot more, I think, depth to its theological understanding of who it is and who it is calling us to be.
Right.
And I think it's good. I think, especially for a sequel, but or a continuation of a story, I think I liked it. And I hope this season you all enjoy it as well. I think it's a story that I'm like, oh, this is great for every generation.
Yeah.
And if you're watching or you're listening, though, chime in. We want to know if you think this is a sequel or part of a series.
Yes.
Not that it's like, oh, more people chose one or the other, so that's the way. I would truly like to know, dear Deuces, watching or listening, whenever it may be, like Hocus Pocus 2 is a sequel, Hocus Pocus 2 is a Hocus Pocus movie.
I love it. Yeah. Well, so we are cognizant of the time, and we're moving towards that. As we are not cognizant of the time and all that.
This is great. We could talk about it forever, and we'll have to revisit it once we'll have to come a bit more.
You'll have to come back, and we can do a follow-up on this. If Disney doesn't take another 30 years, Hocus Pocus 3, we're in.
Yeah.
Even if Disney does take another 30 years, we'll just schedule you for 2051.
That sounds good. Perfect.
On
my calendar.
Love it. Well, Dana, thank you for joining us as always. These conversations could continue to go on, and they do, and we love them. But what biblical book, character, narrative, phrase, whatever are you most reminded of in Hocus Pocus 2?
Oh my goodness. I'm feeling an Ecclesiastes vibe. To everything there is a season. And I think the Sanderson sisters have given us what we needed to hear for the season. And now the new generation is coming forth.
I love it. Arthur?
I'm going to go for Acts about the Apostle Paul as a secondary source about the Apostle Paul. That is, Acts tells a completely different story of Paul's timeline, Paul's call, Paul's everything. It actually revises itself as it goes along. But it does so because it's telling the story to a different community about a different aspect of life in the faith. And Hocus Pocus 2 retcons Hocus Pocus and represents it and recharacterizes it and offers backstory that would have been completely unnecessary and even detrimental to the plot 30 years ago. Our story is one that has a through line that is constantly represented and constantly reworked and constantly respoken.
Amen.
I love that. I'm gonna go with 1 Corinthians 1:10, Arthur, just for you. Ding. That we're at the end of that we're called to be perfectly united in mind and thought. And for me, that's not necessarily a call to be the same always, but if we have a united mind and thought, we can liberate those that we don't even know are oppressed. That when it's like when all hearts and minds, when they hold my hand, and here's the shared power here, say these words, to knowing, the words, as they were doing the incantation where she Winifred, and then oh gosh, I'm forgetting her name. Is it Becca? No.
Becca and Izzy. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as they're, as they say the names, and then it's the Issachar-Melech, they know what to do. It very much in the way in which we say, "The Lord be with you,"
Mm-hmm.
and people. There was a lot of that give and take that shows that the church at its best is united in mind and thought, but doesn't necessarily need to be unified in a singular mind and thought. That they each bring their own gifts and spirits, that the coven widens with each new member, but that liberation, and particularly new liberation, is there for the giving of the exploring, when we can come together and do these things with a united front. That it takes working together to do the work of liberation and to do the work of community.
Amen.
Amen. All right, well, friends, this has been 2 on 1. Dana, thank you for coming back on. And we will talk about any movie you want that doesn't have too many jump scares. I watched, what was the name of the vampire priest show we did with Christine Coleman a while ago?
No.
Midnight Mass.
Midnight Mass?
Yeah, we did Midnight Mass. So I am now a horror movie expert. I don't necessarily want to do anymore, but I didn't realize it was going to be what it was. So I let's be gentle with me, please, but come back about literally anything, and we'd love to talk to you, because you're one of our favorite guests and one of the great parts of the show, Dana. Dana has books out now. She has another book coming out in 2024. Follow her on social media. Demand Penguin Random House give you numerous copies in exchange for money. And order our book too, Are You Still Watching, coming out from Chalice Media at the end of October. Hey, while you're doing all that, go to jeffwunrow.com as well. jeffwunrow.com. Get 15% off your entire store order using our discount code 2on115. We'll let you figure out what are letters and what are numbers. It's great. You can guess. And until then, I'm the Reverend Arthur Stewart.
I'm the Reverend Stephanie Kendall.
And I'm Dana Trent.
And this
Thanks for having me, y'all.
We'll be 2 on 1. Thanks for tuning in, Deuces.
Yeah, you are.
Bye.
Bye.
Get more 2 on 1 at 2on1project.com.